Welcome back. This is the last section of the lecture. There are two objectives we're going to deal with now. Objective 6, which talks about the source of risk in international strategy, and section 7, which talks about the contribution to competitive advantage that operating internationally can produce. So, the risks can broadly be divided into two categories: political risk and economic risk. Political risk includes things like military engagements, which can also lead to sanctions, unknown outcomes, the uncertainty that came from the Arab Spring in 2011, the uncertainty that's existing in the way different countries are dealing with the COVID-19 virus, protectionist political trends like Donald Trump changing the way that trade to America is occurring, often quite arbitrarily. Nationalisation of invested assets, which has occurred and has been talked about occurring during the COVID-19 crisis, but also the nationalisation of hospitals in some countries, the nationalisation of transportation, the return or the change in the way that resources and resource royalties work. Political instability in countries like the Middle East or places like the Middle East. The conflict that exists between India and Pakistan, the instability that's arising in that region as well. And issues related to Northeast Asian security and instability, though that doesn't have quite as big an effect on the global market. In economic terms, we have rising or incompatible debt and perceptions of debt. We've got the challenges that China is facing implementing World Trade Organization agreements, and also perceptions of the challenges that it's facing. Uncertain prices of commodities. We've seen dramatic fluctuations, for example, in oil just recently, that may put the US producers out of business, the shale oil producers out of business, because the cost of producing shale oil is far higher than the cost of producing oil from normal drilling areas. So if you don't have a high price for oil, where's the financial benefit? That's why we've seen negative prices for oil in the market just recently. Success and failures of privatisation and firm restructuring in Eastern European countries and other countries that are opening their markets and their borders. The increasing trend for counterfeit products and the lack of global policing of these products. Again, this is originally an American textbook. I don't know whether there's any evidence that the trend is increasing. In fact, there's probably evidence that it is decreasing, but it is still a significant issue. And failure of countries to pay debt obligations to default, which may infect their currencies during a global economic crisis. And we're just about to enter a global economic crisis that is different to any other global economic crisis that we've had in the past. But we'll see how we get through that. So how does that affect the way we implement international strategy? Well, government oversight and control of economic capital, weak intellectual protection properties, investment losses due to political risk, the threat of terrorism, and the security risk of foreign firms acquiring key natural resources or strategic intellectual property. Now, one of the balances that are occurring is the accusation at the moment that particular countries, particularly China, is taking intellectual property that it effectively by buying it from other countries, by buying companies abroad. That's just the normal way that business is operated, but it does create political tensions in countries and therefore may restrict the operations of companies. Sometimes foreign direct investment is limited because of perceptions of national security. We've seen that in the way that the difficulties that Dubai ports had in taking over P&O. It had to divest itself of some of the US ports that P&O owned. Okay, so objective 7 is just to look at the impact of international strategy on strategic competitiveness. And there's a number of reasons why strategic competitiveness and the ability to obtain above average returns and sustainable competitive advantages arises Some of those are cost-related reasons, but quite often they're reliant on innovation that arises from being exposed to more locations, therefore more information, therefore more ability to need to or to be able to innovate. So internationalization expands the sales of goods and services to global regions, and you benefit from that process because it forces you to improve your performance and your innovation. Hey, that's what I said 1 minute ago before this slide. Secondly, international diversification creates some problems because it means that the firm needs to manage internationally and it needs to learn to do that. So you may have an initial decrease in financial performance as you expand, so it's often a longer term strategy. Firms that are broadly diversified across multiple markets get the best results because the geographical diversification also helps balance economic risk. Many factors contribute to that, as well as just economic issues. Private versus government ownership. Again, strong evidence in America, less so in other countries. Economies of scale and experience, location advantages, increased market size, the opportunity to stabilise your returns because of balancing different markets reduces the overall risk. When one market is up, another is down. You've also, as you diversify, have many sources on your supply chain that protects you from the loss of availability of key components of your value chain, which makes it more likely you're able to weather regional or national issues, local issues that are affecting the performance of one subsidiary and how it contributes to the rest of your organisation. Those linkages, though, also do create some risk because you are reliant across borders. So it folds back to that complexity. And I'm going to give you a list in the very last slide of this lecture of those challenges that I've sort of alluded to as I've offset the positive benefits of international expansion. You get exposure to new products and new markets. You get the opportunity to integrate new knowledge into your operations. You generate resources that can sustain innovation because larger companies are more able to innovate because they have slack funds to be able to enable them to do that, slack resources. And the complex relationship across different countries affects your ability, your mindset, your managerial mindset that increases diversification and innovation, that based on the diversification increases innovation and therefore increases returns. But here are the risks that arise. Geographic dispersion, trade barrier, logistics costs, cultural diversity, complexity, the relationship between the firm and host country, and other country differences can detract from your ability to achieve cost advantages, to attain synergy, to be innovative. So, what have we covered in international strategy today? Well, we've covered 7 objectives. We've given a fairly comprehensive overview, but a fairly quick overview of the key factors that exist within international strategy. We've talked about the incentives that can influence a firm to use an international strategy, the 3 basic benefits, the 1 international business strategy and 3 corporate level strategies that fit within Goschel and Bartlett's model, some trends that are impacting on international strategy. And we've linked those things to how you gain competitive advantage and achieve above average returns. We've talked about the 5 market entry models, the risks of the 5 market entry modes, the risks of international strategy, political risk, economic risk, and then we've brought all those things together again to talk about how they impact on strategic competitiveness, particularly in relationship to diversification and innovation. Okay, in the tutorial next week, there are some key aspects which are in fact about you identifying and exploring examples of these things. Make sure you watch the videos, and I will see you next, later today for last week's tutorial, for the tutorial based on last week's module. Stay safe. Next week's lecture is on cooperative strategy.